Afternoon. Welcome to the House Higher Ed Budget Committee. We'll go ahead and get started with today's meeting. Before we start into our presentations, any requests for bill introductions? Are there any requests for bill introductions? Seeing none, we will double check who's on WebEx. I think Representative Sawyer's on WebEx. Anybody else, Trevor?
No, Mr. Chair, just Representative Sawyer.
Thank you. First up, I would like to welcome Amanda Prosser to the dais with KLRD. She'll be giving an overview of the Kansas State Historical Society. Amanda, thank you.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for your time. Yes, I am here to present on the State Historical Society. This will be presented in the Senate subcommittee next week. Behind me, please welcome Matthew Chappell, Acting Executive Director, and Patrick Zollner, Director. Thank you. The 2022 legislature approved a budget of $7.6 million for fiscal year 2023 from all funding sources. The revised request is $108,000 or 1.4% above the approved budget, but is entirely from special revenue funds. In the revised request, the Historical Society is also requesting one additional FTE to fill a cultural resources position. For fiscal year 2023, the governor does concur with the agency's request for revised estimates. For fiscal year 2024, the agency is requesting $8.7 million from all funding sources, including $4.9 million from the state general fund. The 2024 request is 13.2% above the 2023 revised request for all funding sources, largely due to anticipated increases in salaries and wages from filling vacant positions and special revenue fund increases primarily attributable to additional federal funding through the Paul Brunn Historical Revitalization Grant Program. For fiscal year 2024, the request also includes an increase of about 3% in state general funds that totals out to about $141,000. This is primarily because of the agency's decrease in collecting fees because of the museum closure during renovations. The Historical Society does not seek any state general fund enhancement dollars, though, for fiscal year 2024. Fiscal year 24 includes 73.5 FTE positions, which is 1.5 above the fiscal year 2023 revised estimate. The 2022 legislature, so last year, they passed House Bill 2237 enacting the Kansas Affordable Housing Tax Credit Act. And as a part of that fiscal note, they did allow the Historical Society 1.5 additional FTE. The governor does concur with the agency's requests for 2024. The next part of the analysis, I think beginning on page 9, you can see an overview of the program and performance measures. If you have any interest in those. And on the very back page, the analysis describes the capital improvement plans. The Kansas Historical Society maintains about 57 buildings and structures located at the 16 state historic sites, along with the Kansas History Center complex in Topeka. The agency requests capital improvement expenditures totaling $522,340 in fiscal year 23. And $440,000 in fiscal year 24 for rehab and repair projects. $375,000 each year is from state general funds. The projects requested are listed in the table. As you can imagine, the rehab and repair to keep these buildings operating safely can vary from those with very sophisticated engineering systems, such as the Kansas Museum of History and the State Archives, to rather historic, very historic structures, most of which are over 100 years old. Third in that list, you will see the Cottonwood Ranch located near Studley in Sheridan County. The Historical Society is requesting $20,000 in fiscal year 2023 and $65,000 in fiscal year 2024 from the Private Gifts and Grants Fund to complete repairs at that ranch. The next project is the Constitutional Hall in Lecompton. Much of the exterior wood siding is original walnut and the remainder being local cottonwood. It's kind of cool. To preserve this historic place, the fund would need to carefully scrape the exterior wood, fill and caulk gaps to repaint surfaces, and plastering and repainting interior wood doors, windows, and trim. The agency requests $39,000 in fiscal year 2023, including $15,000 from the Private Gifts and Grants Fund and $24,000 from the National Historic Preservation Federal Fund for this particular project. Also on that list is the John Brown Museum located in Osawatomie and houses the Adair Cabin that was a station on the Underground Railroad and used by John Brown as his headquarters. The 1928 stone building's existing 21-year-old roof requires replacement following severe weather conditions resulting in leaks. The replacement cost is estimated at just over $88,000 from the Federal National Historic Preservation Fund in 2023. And ultimately, the governor does concur with the agency's requests for capital improvement expenditures for both years. And with that, I can stand for some questions, but I'm sure the agency would be happy to answer as well.
Thank you, Amanda. Any questions from the committee? Any questions online? Oh, got one question for Representative Fairchild.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we probably went over this last year, but just to remind us, what was the reason for the increase in the FTE positions from 2022 to 2023 is 17 new FTE positions?
My understanding, I was not here at that time. My understanding is that was when the governor was returning back some FTE from some reduced resources events in the past. And I'm sure if that wasn't clear or was clear as mud, I'm sure the agency would be happy to further explain.
Any other questions? Representative Woodard.
Mr. Chair, I was just going to respond to that. I'm sure the agency can do this, but I think representative that asked the question might remember they had asked for additional FTEs when they were coming back in and coming back on board after the pandemic. And the 17, I think, was actually about half of what they had requested and came back and said that was a compromise number for them. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Have a direct mic over to Vice Chair Blue. She has a comment or question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Quick question on when it comes to federal funds, and maybe this is for the agency. When they do federal funds, is it matching? Do they automatically get certain federal funds? How does that work?
Sure, the agency can testify further, but it does depend on which particular grant.
Okay, thank you.
If there's no further questions, we'll proceed with, is it the acting director, Matthew Chappelle? Mr. Chappelle, Director Chappelle, welcome to the committee.
Thank you. It's my name's Matthew Chappell. I am the acting director of the Kansas Historical Society in France. Yes, it would be Chappelle. So
thank you, Director. I appreciate that. I don't want to mispronounce names, and I have been known to do that before, so my apologies.
No worries, no worries. Chairman and committee members, thank you for the opportunity today to discuss our 2023 and 2024 budget. I also have here with me the past acting director, Patrick Zollner, and for the Humanities Council, Julie Mulvihill is also here with. If there's any questions, I can kind of start by answering some of the questions about the FTE. Last year, we did take off the books 14.5 FTE off of our books. Also, at that same time, we had vacancies from the previous year. We had given up 10% of our budget in the previous year, along with, I think we had 8 FTE that last year we were provided back to fill because we had held those open for that 10%. And I think it was about $453,000 that came back in our budget last year for those FTE. So maybe that helps to explain that a little bit. On the matching, the federal funds, it's a 60-40 match on that. So, okay, I'll try not to read all of this testimony here. I've got a lot. Of course, the Historical Society was established back in 1875. Our mission is to preserve and to share Kansas history by collecting, preserving, and interpreting that history. Our agency is funded not only by federal funds, but state general funds, also fee funds, as well as grants. And we have received some special grants that I can talk about a little bit later too. I did want to let everyone know our program usage this last year. We had about 20,000, almost 21,000 service programs and services and usage on our staff. Quite high. A lot of that is through the electronic device as well. So the majority of it is. I've kind of included, as you all are aware, that the museum gallery, we closed September 3rd of this past year so that we can totally redo that museum. And I wanted to show a couple pictures here, one of which, that very first one, we do have a volunteer from Washburn University that is taking out of the displays. Actually, it's a quiver for arrows, an old native quiver. And then also we have the Kirby Classic Derby car that was named after the Kirby. Remember the good vacuum cleaners? We used to have the good classic Kirby vacuum cleaners. They help support that. Also, you can see on the other page, the protection that we're doing for the train. Total wall completely up of plastic so that we don't get dust and all of that stuff and try to have to clean that big train on it. So one thing that we did apply for is a grant through the National Endowment for the Humanities that we just got for $195,000. And what we're doing is it's going to be a couple staff to help out with pulling things out of the museum and recataloging those and stuff like that. And so we've got that grant that we've gotten some additional staff in that way, as well as a couple on that National Endowment for Humanities, a couple staff, full-time staff, and this is just for 1 year to work on our AV projects, audiovisual projects, making sure that they're cataloged and up to date with the latest technology as well. I wanted to kind of highlight the Paul Brunn grants there. We had issued grants upwards of $500,000, and I went ahead and included the counties and kind of the amounts, and these go out for revitalization in rural areas and the projects in rural areas, not urban. So we anticipate and I think we have applied for an additional $750,000. And for next year, we're hoping to be able to get those funds and get out that money next year for the exact same thing. On those funds, there is no match on that one, so, which is nice. The Heritage Trust Fund also, we grant the Heritage Trust Fund. That comes from registration, deed registration fees that was all built from. And we also provide properties assistance on all different types of properties, homes to buildings, through that program that are currently listed on the national and state historic registries. And I've got a little list there. And I do, for anybody that afterwards, if they'd like to see in their kind of community, I do have printouts of each one of your communities, kind of some of these, along with tax credits and stuff like that, so that you could look at. One thing I kind of wanted to highlight also is the Kansas Archaeological Training Program is going to be out in Scott County this year. It is kind of an annual thing that we work with the Kansas Anthropology Association to do digs and look for artifacts and things like that. And that'll be at the historic Lake Scott. Yeah, Lake Scott out in western Kansas this year in June. So if any of y'all would like to come out there and get your hands dirty, more than welcome to join us out there. We are just requesting the House to approve the governor's recommendation for both the 2023 and 2024 budget. And these, of course, are, all we do is for statutorily programs. If there are any additional, we'll go out and get additional funding for that. So, again, thank you. I did pretty good. I didn't just read it. I'm trying to get better at doing this. So thank you all, and I'll take questions.
Director Chappell, you did great. Appreciate
Thank you,
your
sir.
presentation. Any questions from the committee? Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We talked beforehand and, in Atchison, we got some beautiful, beautiful old homes. When a contractor is hired to repair these homes, does he have to be on your list? Because,
No,
the reason why I wonder is, I don't want to say our craftsmen are not good today, but they're not the same as the craftsmen we had 100 years ago. And to do some of these things, they have to meet certain specs, don't they? And I was just wondering, what kind of, is it hard to get people that do these projects?
I think that it is, and I know at one point in time that there was some discussion in the past about working with some junior colleges for the trades and looking at that preservation aspect of it within the trades. And that was a couple years ago. And I haven't heard anything since then. We'll need to relook at that, but I think that's a big thing that would be beneficial to the state and that education aspect of it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Vice Chair Blue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Quick question. I don't know the answer to this. That's why I'm asking, and I hope it's not a dumb question. So Barton County has a historical society, just like I'm sure many other counties do. Are they underneath you guys as memberships, or the Kansas Historical Society is its own, and then each county or city has their own historical society?
Thank you for the question. We are our own and they are their own. Yeah. So now if they need assistance and help, we communicate with them and help guide them.
Okay. I wasn't sure on when you're in these other counties, how you work together between the different historical societies.
Yeah. If they were to contact us, we would try to assist them.
Director Chappell, I did have a few questions, and I may have missed this during your testimony, but there's a new FTE position, cultural resource outreach position. What does a position like that do? What does that mean in terms of outreach? What types of things would they be working on?
Well, the one that we have in here that you see from the shift of 22 to 23, that was an archaeologist. That was the one where we do have a contract with the Kansas Department of Transportation. And what we do are the surveys and make sure before they do their borrow pits and stuff like that, that there are no artifacts and things like that. Of course, with the Bank of KDOT closing, there are a lot more projects going on with KDOT. So we needed an additional member to go out to the field. And we do this all over the state, those archaeologists do. Now, archaeology is under the Cultural Resources Division.
I guess this question might be more for KDOT, but one position across the state, all 105 counties, all projects, is that they would just,
it's one of multiple, sir.
Oh, okay. Very good.
We have a couple others, and we call that the contract archaeology. And this was an additional to that. There are a couple others.
Very good. Thank you very much. Representative Rogers has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a couple, if that's all right. I wouldn't say that's too much leeway. Okay. If I can't find it again, but I think we had a big increase in funding for archives. Could you explain that? Or was I reading that wrong? apologize for my tardiness. I was with constituents, so I missed part of the explanation. But as I was glancing at it, I thought we saw a big jump.
Representative, which page are you?
Well, that's
so
why
we can all look
I
at it.
can't find it for sure, but I thought it was.
I see what he is looking at. Sorry,
It's a,
Mr. Chair.
Amanda.
Sorry. He's looking at page 18 of the budget analysis, and that is an error. I'll take that into account.
oh, okay, okay. Well,
Thank you, Amanda.
Okay. Okay, because I thought, well, did we inherit some papers and that I wasn't aware of? So, okay, Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind. So as we look at moving forward, and I guess what triggered the whole thing was archives or kind of modern history. As we look at reopening the big facility, the new improved docking is going to have a place for some artifacts, I believe, working with you all. Kind of contemporary history, if you will. You know, when you go out there, you see a lot of things from the 60s and 50s and before, and maybe we kind of stopped at about the 70s. There's, you know, or maybe, you know, when Mars came in and things like that. But as far as, you know, have we done anything in the last 40 years that's worthy of showing the history of Kansas? I mean, I know that's kind of a blunt question, but it seems like, and why we should embrace, you know, the beginnings of our state. To me, history is made every day in some form.
I can say that I am not a part of the group that is currently developing the new museum and all of the exhibits. I've been on the administrative side. I can definitely talk to them and I can get some of that information back to you on that. I know, like you had mentioned, and I think we had talked about before with the new docking and having some artifacts and displays out there. I know more recently, before we started taking everything out, I noticed an Atari, the game Atari, that was in there, you know, so 40 plus years, my time frame. So, but I can definitely look into that a little more.
And I don't think it's in here. And I know we're looking, what, 24? Will the big building open back up again? Are you all, or who is working on a plan to basically encourage everybody to get here, not only in this, you know, out of state, but in state with the new and improved? Because I would think that that would be one of the ways to jumpstart not only dollars to help pay for all that, but just to kind of excite people about the facility.
Yeah. We'll be working with not only our own public information officers, but they'll be working with Kansas Tourism too, is my understanding, as well as our foundation.
Okay.
So
That's a short question, I think. I don't know if I know the answer or not, but okay. As we look at archives, do you house the governor's papers, the legislative records? I think you do, right? I mean, well, not physically maybe there, but you're in charge of the history of Kansas government, correct?
yes, that is correct.
Okay.
That is correct.
And I bring that up just to, because it's more than just the building and the wagons and the train and all that, but all of this, you're the one to make sure that there's a public record of it.
I get every day, I get all the bills that come through and I look at every single one of them, and another person files 2 copies of those away. So yes, we are getting all of that.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Amix.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director, noticed that, and I appreciate the comments in the bit about Constitution Hall. Pretty near and dear to my heart as it is everybody in this room and everybody in the state. Not only the physical, building itself. I know that we dealt with the painting and the upgrades to the outside of the building between COVID, and one of the things that I talked to staff, was hard to find people at the time to be able to do that painting job because of the special care that sprayer go out and knock them. We having a harder time finding those artisans to go out and make those kind of repairs.
I think there is a shortage of folks like that out there. Yeah. I think we're having a harder time in finding those.
So in a lot of industries, we're seeing, people of trades and all kinds of positions lost a lot of people in the workforce over the last couple of years. We've just seen a number of people that, was able to do that stuff. Have they retired? Have they left?
That's a good question. I can't answer where they went. I don't know if they've gone out of state or they've stayed here and they retired. I think a lot of, personally, I think a lot of individuals have retired out of business and service that had that knowledge, that used to do that. A lot of people during COVID, they quit and they've found other ways to make a little bit of money and stuff like that.
Question, Representative Fairchild.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. From 2023 to 2024, it says that it's an all funds increase of 13.2%. Most of that is coming from federal funds. It's only a 3% state general fund increase, but I'm just wondering, for this particular year, why is it necessary for there to be any increase in the state general fund when you're getting such a big increase in the federal funds?
I think the increase is associated with the House Bill 2237, which is a part of the tax credits, that when we receive that money, it's about $106,000 in STF plus a 1.5 FTE in that. And that was the historic tax credits where they changed the program to kind of a rural. They did a 40, 30, 25, depending on the size of the rural community. And so with that bill, that's where we had submitted our fiscal notes and stuff. And it was about $106,000 in SDF to cover the cost of the employees to run that program, the changes in that program. And then the big jump on the federal is the Paul Braun for $750,000.
Thank you. Director Chappell, did you have more information about that dig this summer in Scott County? And I was just kind of curious if that was it in partnership with Fort Hays State University or was it just the Historical Society hosting that?
I think actually, I don't think it was Fort Hays. I think there are a couple other doctors. I can get more information on that to you, sir.
Okay. I was just kind of curious because you extended the invitation and it piqued my interest a little bit. Is this a learning opportunity for kids and adults alike?
Absolutely.
Okay. If you'd send the committee some more information, maybe we could distribute that to all the members and people in our districts as well. So,
okay.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, Director Chappell, thank you very much for your time and answering questions today.
Thank you all.
Yes, that's a great idea, Representative Woodard. I would welcome a field trip, a summer excursion. So next I would like to welcome, back to the podium, Amanda Prosser, KLRD, to give an overview of the Kansas State Library. Amanda?
Yes, I'm here to present the budget for State Library as well. Behind me, please welcome Ray Walling, our state librarian, who will be providing testimony and will be available for questions following this presentation. The 22 legislature approved a budget of $6 million for fiscal year 2023 from all funding sources, including $4 million from the state general fund, The agency's revised estimate of expenditures submitted in the fall included no requests for supplemental funding and no significant changes. Figure 4 details a breakdown of the expenditures. Second in the list, you can see that contractual services is increasing over time. This is because in fiscal year 23, throughout the year, the library has been reclassifying digital library books and subscription services from the commodities and capital outlay categories into the contractual services. Also to note, fiscal year 23 revised request in subsequent years is below fiscal year 22 actuals by about $2 million or 25%, which is attributable to the one-time federal ARPA funds that were received in 22 that were used for grants to local libraries, agency technology improvements, and state professional development support and state services in the form of Tumble Books, which is a children's ebook service. For fiscal year 24, the state library requests $6 million, including $4 million from SGF and $1.9 million in federal funds. The fiscal year 24 request is $13,000, or 0.2% above the 23 revised request, which is mainly due to the increase in the health insurance rate. The governor concurs with both 23 and 24, and with that, I stand for questions.
Thank you, Amanda. Question, Vice Chair Bloom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Amanda, you might have said this and I was looking someplace else. What consists of other funds? It says all other funds on.
Yes, sure. All other funds is anything that is not state general fund. In this case, so different fee funds, special revenue funds, etc.
Do you know why it went from $450 to $12.4 thousand to almost $1,500 if you look on 22, 23, and 24? It's kind of a drastic change. I'm on the first page. I'm looking at just the budget overview.
I do see what you're noticing. I can't testify that. If the agency can, I'm happy to get back to you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Amanda? If not, we'll proceed with testimony from the Executive Director for the State Library, Kansas State Library, Ray Walling. Director Walling, welcome to the committee.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Vice Chair, Ranking Member, and members of the committee for this opportunity to appear before you on behalf of the State Library's budget proposal. I also want to express my gratitude to Amanda and KRRD for all of the important work they do in helping to prepare the budget. My name is Ray Walling. I am the state librarian. I was confirmed 2 weeks ago, but have served in an acting role since June of 2022. My agency's history dates back to 1855 with the establishment of the Territorial Library. However, today's structure for the State Library came into existence around 1963. Currently, the agency has 3 divisions: the Reference Services Division, the Talking Books Services Division, and the Statewide Services Division. The Reference Services Division serves the government information needs of 2 groups: state government, including the executive and legislative branch. For this area, they develop collections, train state employees, and provide research assistance, as well as serve the constituents, your constituents, by providing legislative hotline and Ask a Librarian services, state depository program, and an online repository of state government information. The Talking Book Service Division provides reading and information resources for those with print disabilities. This includes offering support, outreach, and engagement activities, as well as producing audio recordings of books, magazines, and other information resources of local interest. The Statewide Services Division provides access to and support services for databases, ebooks, e-audiobooks, and skill-building resources that are available to all Kansans. Additionally, they're responsible for the infrastructure and support for resource sharing between all libraries in the state. This includes the development, maintenance, and oversight of a Kansas library catalog, as well as the interlibrary loan system that's associated with it. Additionally, we provide subsidization of the courier service that goes throughout the state that helps deliver those resources between the libraries. As Amanda mentioned, roughly 2/3 of our budget comes from state general funds, 1/3 comes from federal funding, and then a few special revenue funds as well. Federal funding is mostly from the LSTA program, or the Library Services and Technology Act, which is a program of the Institute of Museum and Library Services. There are a few caveats with the spending. First of all, there is a spending match that has to come from the state, and then a maintenance of effort requirement as well. Spending through this program has to be associated with a 5-year plan that we submit. We just submitted a new plan in June or July of this year, or last year, I should say. And then basically that plan is aligned with the goals and objectives that are laid out in statute, federal statute. So that is one of our main sources of funding. I want to mention 3 aspects of the budget, which Amanda hit on. First of all, the reclassification of several ebook expenditures to contractual services. While there is an account code for books under capital outlay, ebooks are licensed under a variety of models that could be considered subscriptions, consumables, or capital outlay, sometimes all 3 within the same vendor. So there was discussion among SMART, my staff, and our budget analysts from the Division of Budget, and we decided that most of those resources could be considered under contractual services moving forward to simplify things. As was noted, we did have a significant amount of money from the ARPA program, most of which was spent last fiscal year, about $36,000 of which was spent the first quarter of this fiscal year, which means that we have nothing remaining out of the ARPA funds, which is why we saw that drastic decrease. Additionally, we did give some money for one-time expenditures associated with courier service due to the increase in gasoline over the summer. There are responsibilities in our contract that if it goes above a certain amount per gallon, we have to pay surcharges. Actually, NECLS, the Northeast Kansas Library System, pays the surcharges, but we needed to help support libraries and continue that service because it's vital to what we do. Additionally, I would mention that the agency is currently developing a new 3-year strategic plan. That should be included in next year's budget, and we probably will begin working through that beginning next fiscal year. At this time, I welcome any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much. Any questions? One question, or as many as you want, Vice Chair Blue.
Thank you. One, I want to say thank you for coming. You just sparked my interest. I have to drive to Texas, so I'm going to come to your library to get a book or something to read or to listen to on the drive down. So my question, when it comes to the ARPA funds, then are those considered in your budget as federal funds, or are they all funds or all other funds? And then on top of it, do you guys have late fees and you receive revenue from that? What are
Or special funds?
That's what basically.
Earlier. Okay. We have one fund that's kind of a fee fund. The vast majority of the money of that is from the copiers that we have in the library. There's not really anything else that goes into that. We also have some special revenue funds. One is a general gifts and donations fund. Another is one that was developed for the statewide database program where libraries contributed to that fund over the years. That was ended by the last state librarian. However, there was money left over, so we're saving that in case we need it for some rainy day down the road. There was extra money from a Spark grant we got several years ago. We have spent some of that this fiscal year for salaries related to the project that is ongoing from that Spark grant. So that's where some of the money has come from that we're actually spending in special funds this year. And then we just started a new special fund for the Talking Book service because we receive donations through our participants in the service, through people they know, and they have specific requirements that money be spent on talking books. So we want to make sure we're honoring our donors' requests.
Thank you. And another question that was kind of sparked over here that made me think, Dolly Parton's library that a lot of communities are doing. Do you have to become a member, or how does that work, and how do you guys work with all of that?
The state library is not directly involved in that project. I have talked to somebody that is involved in that project. They work more on a county basis then working directly with the state library, there with libraries and other organizations to develop that program locally.
So
I think
then-
the department, sorry.
Well, I was just gonna say, so then the local libraries are part of the state library? Are you guys all together?
So the state library, the local libraries, and the regional systems are all kind of their separate entities to a certain extent. However, the state library has some, and actually the advisory board for the state library has some regulatory abilities over the regional systems. The state librarian and the state library staff provide resources, obviously our statewide resources that are available to all Kansas, but through the libraries as well. And then also consulting services about library law, about best practices, those kinds of things we do provide to the local libraries, but it's not like we oversee either of those directly.
Thank you.
I had a question as it relates to a service that's provided to the legislature. I believe we're able to access via subscription newspaper articles from the Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, New York Times. So if the legislature wanted to get a different subscription, how does that process work? Who decides what subscriptions that we have access to? And is that renewed on an annual basis?
Sure. So you're referring to electronic subscriptions or print subscriptions or both?
Online.
Online. Okay. Well, the director of reference is responsible for making the decisions of what we order. So I strongly encourage legislators to reach out to Cindy directly if they have requests for materials. However, what I would say is that we had a RFP process where we were looking for as many essentially Kansas publications in one contract as possible. We awarded that contract to Newsbank. We had a couple of different options from what I understand. This obviously predates my time in the agency, but the daily newspapers that were available were at a reasonable price. The weekly papers were an additional cost that we could not encumber at that point. That contract opens up again in 2024. So then there's the ProQuest US Major Dailies and the ProQuest US Newsstream. ProQuest US Major Dailies, that's a set collection, and it is those major papers that you referenced from national papers. And the US Newsstream actually is part of our statewide database contract, and that also is up for renewal in 2024, but the focus on that is providing resources for whole state rather than just the legislature.
So is there more newspapers available to us as legislators than those three I named? Because you had mentioned.
So US Newsbank, I'm sorry to cut you off.
Yeah, perhaps there's is it a news clipping service, Newsbank, or?
Yeah, US Newsbank provides access. We have a couple different subscriptions there. We have a product called America's News, which includes 1,430 publications, including such publications as Dodge City, Daily Globe, Hayes Daily News, the Ottawa Herald, and several other Kansas publications. We also have subscriptions specifically for the Kansas City Star, the Capital Journal, and the Wichita Eagle through that as well.
Who is able to take advantage of that subscription? Is it the legislature, or is it all state employees, or how far down does it go?
If they're coming from a state IP address that we've registered with the vendor, they should be able to access those resources. Mostly it's going to be capital grounds, but we're working and looking at alternatives to extend that to other state offices.
Okay, thank you very much. Very informative. I appreciate that. I like knowing what resources are available, whether it's a book, audiobook you could check out, or can you download those as well?
We have both ebooks and e-audiobooks through our cloud library product.
Very
So
good.
through all Kansas residents can access those.
Okay, thank you. Representative Wassinger.
I just thought I'd help the vice chair understand if you get a state of Kansas library card, you can download any books that you are interested in, which is what I do on my drives back and forth. So I listen to books from your library on a regular basis. Sometimes I'm frustrated because I can't get what I want because someone else has checked it out, but that's not your fault. That's popularity of books. So it's very easy and it's very handy. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative. Any other questions? Representative Rajas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for being here. welcome aboard. This is one of those other things key to the state. It's probably underutilized, but I do enjoy the email. I don't know how many years I've set that up, but I think your previous predecessor's predecessor maybe got this thing lined up. So to get, it's kind of Kansas in the news, so you don't have time, you don't have time to read everything. So it's good to keep up to date. And again, this is one of these agencies that we probably don't do a ton of scrutiny on, but it's a formality. So thanks for putting up with our questions. But I guess I do want to kind of plant that seed in moving forward. I know over the last few years we've had this discussion, and I see it creeping up again, and that is, beyond the physical stuff, but these databases, it's electronic. And so is that, as you are talking with some of your colleagues in other states and other places and other team members, is that what we can expect, say, a 15, 20, 40% increase in the cost of these databases? Of course, as they grow, we know there's going to be a cost, but that's something as far as we look at budget adjustments. If there is an enhancement, simply a matter of as a way of doing business. So can you talk about, that electronic version, the electronic and how to have access to those databases and the cost or investment that is?
Sure. My previous position, actually 2 positions ago, I was an electronic services librarian. So I can speak from that perspective as well. So when I was in that role, I would anticipate a 5% increase for databases and an 8% or so increase for periodicals, journals, magazines, etc. Obviously, the pandemic, there's been some issues where the cost of printing has gone up with papers, prices, and things like that. That has been a challenge. But that's generally what we expect. Now, fortunately, as you probably saw on the cost avoidance sheet, we have a very good deal in the state of Kansas that we can provide these services at a relatively reasonable cost. Fortunately, some of these contracts are locked in, so the costs stay the same for all the years of the contract. In some cases, some cases we know exactly how much it increases each year, and it is under that 5%. So that's part of the negotiation process through the Office of Procurement and Contracts that we go through to try to keep that cost down. But it is a challenge for us. It's a challenge for all libraries.
Now, if I remember, is there like a consortium, maybe several states, to cut costs down as you look at enrolling in these databases or not?
Generally, the vendors don't like to work with multiple states. There are multiple consortiums within the state of Kansas, especially in the academic library community. For the private academics, they have a consortium. The 2 years have a consortium. The 4-year publics have a consortium. But there's other consortiums and other purchasing that's going on in the state, obviously.
Mr. Chairman, quickly, I will. Jumping back to something else, though, is everything that is part of the state library, is it available online? Are there certain things that you can only say physically get here or someplace that not everything that you have is available, say those of us that live 4 hours away?
Yeah. So part of what I mentioned in an earlier response was that desire to extend access beyond the Capitol grounds and beyond offices where we give passwords and usernames to specific people and have a better way of providing that access. We've suggested that through the executive branch's IT plan. That's one of our goals to do eventually. But that is something we're working on. Now, to answer your other part of your question, what we have upstairs, a lot of it is historical and unique that we don't necessarily have in print. Some of it we have through like Hein Online and the database products that we have, but there is some unique content upstairs as well. Actually, I shouldn't say some. There is unique content upstairs as well.
Okay, that's kind of the answer, but I guess are we going to look to where, in order to make some of the other stuff, the historical stuff, electronic, is it? Would it be impossible or cost prohibitive to say some of those historic books to be able to view them online? Because again, as we know, everything's moving that way. Is it a cost? Is it a manpower? Is it something that, as a we don't want to mess with? I'm just trying to anticipate down the road if we're trying to take on something like that, what that might entail.
It's something actually we're already invested in. I think we actually started with the Historical Society several years ago with the Kansas Government Information Online Library. It's a project that we continue to work on. I think it is challenging because the amount of online information, the amount of information we're trying to harvest and keep track of and make accessible. And I'm sure you guys have the same problem in the Historical Society. But it is a project that we're very invested in, not just for, I wouldn't say preservation because it's not the print material, but for access and making it accessible statewide. And that product is available to everyone. I mean, it's not IP range limited.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other questions? Representative Smith.
Mr. Chairman. Myself, I was a poor reader. I didn't want to read. Because of that, it made my entire education career difficult. I had to work harder to finish everything. Last Sunday, I was in church and 4 kids got up and read. I'm talking about 4th grade kids, and they did very well. I was impressed with their ability to read. I was watching the news a few years ago, and there was a library that was 100% paperless. And I'm thinking, gosh, you know, everything's paperless. People aren't going to read like they used to. Hey, here's a good book. Read it. I think maybe some of our reading skills will go down. If you got to do a book report in school, hey, go get the audio and listen to it. And just your thoughts on that. Because I do enjoy listening to a book.
Well, that's not in my background, is kind of looking at literacy in that area. What I found interesting about some recent conversations I've had in job interviews and other groups that I've talked to is still that interest in having the paper copy. We've asked people, what's your favorite book and what's the book you're reading now? What format you're reading in? It seems like a lot of them are saying still print. But there is interest, obviously, in the online. We're seeing it in the usage statistics. We're seeing it in our higher education institutions and being able to provide the resources to support them. But it's interesting to me that we're still seeing a lot of people saying print is their preferred means. And I don't have national numbers or statistics to prove that, just recent discussions that I've been involved in.
Thank you. Mr. Walling, I appreciate your testimony and your insights today. Thank you for being here. And I guess if we have any other questions, we'll reach out to you and let you know. But in the meantime, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Okay. So that concludes our presentations for today from the Kansas State Historical Society as well as the Kansas State Library. We are scheduled to discuss and make recommendations on those budgets on Monday. It's hard looking down the road to know what the House schedule is going to be. So I know that's a pro forma day, but we're going to proceed with our 1:30 as scheduled. Come with your questions. If you have any concerns, please let me know in advance if you would, just as a courtesy. In terms of later in the week, we don't have anything scheduled. So trying to give everybody some time to breathe and do homework as it relates to the higher education universities that'll be appearing the week after. So prepare yourself for that because that will be a full week of budget hearings. One last thing, I was going to ask Brianna. Today in House Appropriations, we learned about a new feature that KLRD has unveiled, and maybe they haven't briefed you about it, but if you could get us more information to this committee about how to access that, I think that'd be very beneficial. Basically, what KLRD has done is they've taken a lot of information as it relates to the state budget, expenditures, receipts, things like that. And they've provided a new tool. You can view it online as well as on your phone. So it's very helpful to have some bar graphs, some pie charts, things like that to kind of give it a visual behind the numbers. So if you could please distribute that. I think there's a QR code even that was provided. So So is there anything else for the good of the order? If not, I will gavel out.